Before we get into the meat and bones of today's Daily Tea, I mentioned yesterday that we lost a dear colleague and friend, David Knowles. And Gordon, the tributes that have come flowing into the Telegraph website in response to his death at the age of 32, I mean, they've been absolutely heartwarming, devastating, but heartwarming. And I just wanted to read one out, which kind of sums up the mood, really. I mean, we have received a message a minute, I think, since we announced his very untimely and tragic death yesterday. And we've heard from people across the world, including people in Ukraine that listened to Ukraine, the latest, which was the podcast that he set up 2 years ago. Ella in Chicago best sums up the mood of the tributes. When a voice that fills your mornings with information about a thing you care deeply about for 922 days, you grow quite fond of it, attached even, and when that voice is suddenly absent, you finally see just how big of an impact it made on you. As a listener, I am forever grateful to David Knowles and his elite journalism, reporting and storytelling. Losing David Knowles is losing an educator, a routine, a voice of reason, of comfort, of truth, of unapologetic freedom. Dramatic breaking news in the Tory leadership race, Gordon. Do you see how exciting I'm trying to make this thing?
Yeah.
Mel Stride, shock horror, is out.
Poor Mel.
5 become 4. But what do we make of Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, both leading this contest?
And as 1,750 prisoners are released early due to overcrowding, we'll get the reaction to Labour's controversial policy from the former prison governor who dealt with Moors murderer Myra Hindley and serial killer Rose West behind bars.
And the Princess of Wales's candid video marking the end of her chemotherapy treatment. Majestic or mawkish? Welcome to the Daily Tea with me, Camilla Tominey.
And me, Gordon Rayner.
Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As chairman of the 1922 committee and returning officer in the leadership contest for the leadership of the Conservative Party, I'm pleased to confirm the result of the second ballot, which was held in here earlier this afternoon. There were 119 votes cast and no sport ballots. So I'll read out the results for each candidate in alphabetical order. Kemi Badenoch, 28 votes. James Cleverly, 21 votes. Robert Jenrick, 33 votes. Mel Stride, 16 votes. And Tom Tugendhat, 21 votes. So as a result of that, Mel Stride is eliminated from the contest.
Wowzers. All right, poor old Mel. Mel-mentum. Not so much.
Mel stayed the same dumb.
Mel Stride out of the leadership race.
Yes.
Kind of predictable. Tugendhat will be happy. That was Bob Blackman, the chairman of the 1922 committee, revealing the results of the second round of voting among Tory MPs in the Tory leadership race. Gordon, summarise the numbers, please. Who's out on top?
So Rob Jenrick is still out ahead on 33 votes.
So he's gained 5. Thank you.
Kemi Badenoch has gained 6 and is now on 28 votes, still in second place behind Jenrick. James Cleverly was on 21 votes, is still on 21 votes.
Wow, so all that talk of him stealing votes from Priti Patel because they're in neighbouring constituencies in Essex was nonsense.
Well, and also I think there were some MPs who had been named as switching to Cleverly, so that suggests he's lost a couple of votes.
Or they've lied.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. Tom Tugendhat was on 17, is now on 21,
okay.
So he's
plus
picked
4.
So he is now joint third, and that means that sadly poor old Mel Stride was on 16, is still on 16, and he's out.
So he didn't get any more Mel-mentum, ironically. They thought that he was gaining Mel-mentum. He's gained nothing. He's stayed where he is.
No.
He's basically astride in history, in the history of this. We keep on saying that about Mel Stride because he had revealed on the Daily Tea, he was once a tour guide and has got a very good knowledge of the history of this great nation of ours. So, your thoughts, Gordo? Badenoch's doing better than people had been briefing.
Yes, it's not really a very exciting result, is it?
Well, it's 2 righties on top. The membership will be delighted.
Yes, but nobody swapped places.
No.
There was lots of talk of James Cleverly actually overtaking everybody and being James the First was going to be our little line, but we can't really use that now.
Right.
He has stayed exactly where he is. And so the question now, I suppose, is that if Mel has gone out, does that mean that him being a moderate, does James Cleverly or Tom Tugendhat pick up perhaps all of those votes and then storm into second place, even first place?
There's a really mixed bag supporting Stride. They could go anywhere in my mind. But also now this all comes down to conference.
Yeah.
So it becomes a beauty pageant at conference, which is the last weekend in September.
Yeah.
They all do their little bit. They all go to all the parties. They schmooze. And then the membership basically narrows 4 down to 2. We know that the membership at conference... No, it's MPs. What am I talking about?
The MPs narrow it down to 2, then the members vote on the final 2.
So the MPs still have the sway. However, the point is they might be influenced by how the membership receive each of the 4 candidates.
Yeah.
So if one of them has this spectacular moment with the grassroots, it's going to be really hard to ditch them out of that final 2.
Like David Cameron did.
Yeah. Can we have
Yes,
a
we'll
moment
update
with
the
the
board.
whiteboard?
Sorry, Mel.
Oh, Mel's out.
Oh, dear.
And
There
can
he
we
is.
put the... Oh, this is
This is
the
the
order.
same. Nothing's moved. Unless maybe we need to move Tom there because he's now joint.
Is he joint?
Yes, he's joint.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like
There you
that.
go.
Nothing has changed, to quote a
Yes.
former Tory leader,
That's right.
Theresa May. And it's important after today's winter fuel allowance vote, Gordon, that we do have an effective opposition. I appreciate some are saying, this is a Westminster bubble story. Nobody cares about the Tory leadership. Well, you should really, because we've got Labour taking money away from pensioners.
Yep.
We've got Labour releasing violent prisoners, which we'll get onto in just a moment.
Yep.
So actually, we do need an effective opposition to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah, but the problem is that even though this has been the biggest rebellion of Starmer's premiership so far, we're talking about 53 Labour MPs who didn't vote for various reasons, and 1 who voted against the government, who presumably now will be suspended, as that's what Keir Starmer does.
John Cricket.
Yeah. So, but the problem is that Labour have a working majority of 167. So even when they have quite a big rebellion like this, they still won by 120.
Symbolically, though, this is a bad moment for start. You know, he's only in the infancy of this premiership, and this could be a sort of albatross around his neck, like poll tax was for Thatcher. This is going to be the Prime Minister that took money away from pensioners.
Well, I mean, we were saying, weren't we, that Thatcher was known as Thatcher Milk Snatcher for ever, pretty much, just
What's
because
this?
she...
Starmer,
I haven't really
winter
thought...
fuel payment snatcher,
Yeah.
doesn't have the same ring.
We need a bit of time to work on that.
Yeah, we'll work on that for tomorrow.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, Gordon, you never know what might happen to this policy in the Lords, where, let's be honest, there are lots of pensioners.
There are.
They might rebel against it. I know Ros Altman, former pensions minister under David Cameron, is been inundated with emails of complaint about it. So there might be a rebellion on the red benches as well as the green.
And because it wasn't in their manifesto, they can't use the Salisbury Convention to force it through in the Lords, which means it could get bogged down.
Happy prisoner release day, Gordon.
Oh, thanks, Camilla.
No cards, but what's happening?
Well, in case anybody's missed this, up to 1,750 offenders have spent their last night in prison. There has been a mass early release today under the Ministry of Justice's emergency plan to ease the overcrowding crisis in jails. What it means is that eligible prisoners who've served only 40% of their sentence rather than 50% will be automatically released. It doesn't include people who are in jail for serious violent offences with sentences of 4 years or more, as well as sex offenders, and it also excludes people convicted of domestic abuse.
Oh, that's okay then.
Yeah.
It does include drug dealers.
It does.
So one of them came out, a lifelong Labour voter, he declared, 20 years old, praised the very good Labour policy and boasted that he was, quotes, gonna get lit after he was released, which, as you will know, Gordon, means slang for going to take drugs and get drunk.
I do now.
So he's celebrating his early freedom after leaving HMP ISIS in southeast London, which is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we also heard, thanks to GB News' Charlie Peters, who was outside HMP Wandsworth, again praising this policy introduced by a former director of public prosecutions, no less.
Yeah. Are you grateful to Keir Starmer for this release scheme?
No. Keir Starmer, I am, because I'm a big Labour...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Big Labour supporter?
I'll have the old in with the new. It's been too long anyway, I think. How you doing? Come here. Let's go. Come on, this. You all right?
So there you have it. Labour supporters, trade unionists,
Yeah.
lefties,
Yes.
jailbirds.
Yes.
Great. Right.
Marvellous. But there is a downside, believe it or not. Martin Jones, who is HM Chief Inspector of Probation, told the Today programme this morning that offenders who were being freed were almost bound to be sent back to jail within days or weeks because things will go wrong in the community and they would breach the terms of their licence.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
This seems to me to be a little wrong-headed from a man who wants us to follow the rules. We should be banning smoking and vaping outdoors, but we will let people like drug dealers free onto the streets of Britain to continue taking drugs and selling drugs.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that for months now and before the election, we kept on hearing from Sir Keir Starmer about how he used to be Director of Public Prosecutions. He must have said it every single time he was on telly. He was tough on crime. You can trust me because I was the DPP. I took on terrorists. I took on the drug gangs. And now he's letting people out of prison. I think, look, clearly this is quite a long-term problem that's been building up. And there was some speculation, wasn't there, that part of the reason Rishi Sunak called the election early was because he knew this crisis was coming. And it was another piece of bad news that he wanted to avoid before the election. But there have been alternatives suggested. I'm unclear as to why the government was so quick to dismiss the offer from Estonia, for example, who've got loads of spare prison places. They said, you can send some of your prisoners over here. Was that even considered?
Well, Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Tice, was saying to me at the weekend, if 20% of the prison population is foreign, why don't we house the foreign prisoners in Estonia if they're offering to rent us cells?
Yeah.
And that would free up space. The other slightly incongruous part of all this, which has been raised a lot, and I appreciate that she did post something absolutely appalling about Muslims and mosques. But the 53-year-old grandmother with no previous convictions who shared one Facebook post during the riots and then was put in prison for 15 months. Is that the right use of prison space compared to this drug dealer who's going to get lit in the next few hours?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, there are ways of punishing people quite severely that don't involve going to prison. You can tag them. You can make them submit to curfews. You can effectively put them under house arrest. You can restrict their liberty in quite a lot of different ways. You can make them do community service, which would be beneficial to the community and cost less and not take up a prison place. So, yeah, I think there is a lot of politics here, isn't there? Because the reason that so many of these prison places have been squeezed is, as you say, because we had the riots. Clearly, some of those people did need to go to prison, but I think Keir Starmer was very keen to make a political point. Look at me, I'm tough. And that's part of the reason we are where we are.
I appreciate that two middle-class people are pining over the state of the prisons. Have you ever been in prison, Gordon?
Last
As an
time
inmate
I checked,
rather than a visitor?
No,
I have
never
visited
been.
some for
Never
reporting
been.
purposes.
Yes,
No,
I've done that.
I haven't been in prison either.
No.
It's probably best for us to get some expertise from somebody who's spent a lot of time in prisons and can tell us what it's like literally from the inside. We're going to speak now to Vanessa Frake-Harris, MBE, who used to be governor of Wormwood Scrubs.
Vanessa, welcome to the Daily Tea. Thank you for coming on. Vanessa, as of 2024, the UK prison population is just under 88,000 people. Is this release going to make much of a difference?
In the short term, yes, but I think we have to remember this is to allow the prisons breathing space, no more. This is not a long-term fix by any stretch of the imagination. And if something drastic's not done within the next sort of 6 months to a year, then in 6 months' time, I'll be sat here talking about the prison overcrowding system again, because it's going to take something drastic to sort our prison systems out.
Tell us what those drastic measures would be, because I think looking from the outside in, is it just a question of funding? Do we need root and branch reform? Is it just a question of more prison cells? What would you do?
Well, I think first of all, there's been successive governments, and I don't mean just the last government or indeed the Tories, but going back, to the Blair and Brown days. prisons have always been seen as a vote winner. You know, let's lock people up, let's put them behind bars, and show them how tough we are on law and order. It's never been a vote winner. So successive governments have ignored calls that, you know, our prison population is growing faster than we can cope with, faster than we can build prisons with. And for me, I see, you know, old Victoriana prisons that are no longer fit for purpose, some with sewage running down the landings, rat infested, rubbish, you know, cells that are no longer really fit for human habitation. So for my mind, that is what we should be building new prisons for, is to replace these old 200-year-old buildings, which will house modern technology to prevent drugs and contraband getting into jails. I think also we need to look at inadequate staffing. You know, our staffing once was a time that the prison service was looked at as a long-term career. These days, it's you know, staff are leaving quicker than they're being recruited. You know, so we're now in the position where, say, somewhere like Wandsworth, a quarter of the staff at Wandsworth joined in 2024.
Wow.
Well, that's just ridiculous, expecting such inexperienced staff to manage a prison. And with that comes mistakes. So you get escapes and you get drugs in and you get staff that are easily manipulated and coerced. So also, I think more than anything, we need to look as a society about what we want to do with and use our prisons for, because somewhere along the way, you know, we've got lost in the let's lock them up and throw away the key brigade. You know, it's going to take a real eye-opener to change people's mindset, not only politicians, but also the general public, that locking up people for short sentences doesn't actually work. And locking up some people for first-time non-violent offences doesn't actually work and causes more harm than good. So I think as a society, we need to decide what we actually want to do.
Well, what would be the alternative?
Who we want to lock up, how long we want to lock them up for, and what we're going to do with them when we lock them up.
Can you give us an example of what you could do with somebody who is, you know, potentially would have been given, or under the current system, a short sentence, and what the alternative that you would suggest to that would be?
Okay, you look at, say, somebody who has a drug habit and may thieve to manage that drug habit, to enable them to make a bit of money to buy drugs. Is it really acceptable to put that person in jail for, say, 6 months because they walked into the local Tesco's and nicked a bottle of whiskey? You know, is it not better to address that drug habit by putting somebody in a place where that drug habit can be addressed? Because in prison, drugs are too easy to get hold of for any of the above reasons I've already said. You know, all they do is come out and just want to feed off that drug habit. And also, if you're locking somebody up for 6 months, well, certainly under the old system, out of that 6 months, they do 50%, so 3 months. So in that 3 months, they've probably lost their home. They've lost any employment if they had it. They've lost their support systems. So we're letting them out to virtually nothing. So what opportunities do they have? They don't have any. So what they end up doing is getting on the crime roundabout. Yeah. And once you get on that roundabout, it's very difficult to get off.
And Camilla, definitely, I'm sure, I have spoken to successive Home Secretaries and prison ministers who have all tended to make the same points. They very often say we need to, you know, address this problem with short sentences, find an alternative. Is the answer to this just down to political will, or is it down to money? I
think it's the political will in the first instance. like I said, prisons aren't vote winners. Nobody wants to say, right, we're going to invest in reducing reoffending, to go into schools and talk to young people about prisons and crime, etc., which is what I used to do when I was at Scrubs. We used to go into schools and we did this thing called Prison Me No Way. And it was talking to young people between sort of 15, 16, 17-year-olds about crime and about prison and what happens in prison, etc., and showing them that, that isn't the answer. But all of that sort of thing, funding has long since gone. And I think that not only is the political will, but the political will has got to be the change of mindset to the people. Because there's still an awful lot of people in this country that think jail is the answer. Don't get me wrong. I'm not some far left person that thinks, sees through everything through rose tinted glasses. Far from it. But what I do think is that prison should be those that we need to protect society from, those violent sexual predators that need locking away and dealt with. That's the people that we should be using prison for, not people who don't pay their council tax or can't afford to pay bills, etc. That's who are jailed for. This is a controversial one, and I'm sure many people will have something to say about it, but who got a grandmother who never been in trouble with the law, got jailed for 15 months for writing some stupid comment whilst drunk on Facebook. A main carer of her husband, never been in trouble before. What good does that do? She'd have been far better serving that sentence in the community, talking to the people that she offended and seeing the reaction of her words on them. That would have been my suggestion.
Completely
not
agree,
using
Vanessa.
yet another prison place.
She would have been better off visiting a mosque and engaging with members of the Muslim community in her area.
Absolutely.
Vanessa, before we just speak about your own personal experience, because you've written this compelling book called The Governor, and we want to ask you about your Scrubs experience, just very briefly, this flirting with the idea of sending prisoners to Estonia, what's your reaction to that?
Okay, look, we've got probably about 8,000 foreign national prisoners currently languishing in our jails that we can't get rid of because their countries don't want them back, or the human rights lawyers have got in the middle of it, so we can't get rid of those. We've got illegal immigrants coming over on boats that we can't send back anywhere. What on earth? How on earth do ministers think that, we're going to open up a door and say, come on, Tommy, you're off to Estonia today? Yeah. Because the only people that I can see, making anything out of that will be the human rights lawyers. And the first one who's told he's going to Estonia will be asking his lawyer for a judicial review. Yes. And it'll be dragged through the courts at great expense to the British taxpayer, because it'll all be legal aided, how embarrassing for a country that we can't manage our own prisons and prisoners.
Gordon, this is why we get experts on like Vanessa to debunk my idea. Because I was saying earlier, Vanessa, I think Estonia is quite a good idea. Yeah. You've outlined there why it isn't. Being a woman in charge of Wormwood Scrubs, I mean, when you were in charge there, what was the approach to kind of rule by fear? Did you need a little bit of love in there? How did you approach it?
No, I think women who rule by fear are in danger of becoming bullies, and a man would be probably robust, but a woman would be a bully. No, people say to me, do you talk to prisoners? Well, yes, of course you talk to prisoners. You've got to be able to listen, to communicate, to understand to a degree why they're there in the first place. Some you absolutely can't understand why they're there, but I think you have to find your own medium as to how you communicate with prisoners. And mine was certainly never through fear. I was always fair, always firm, never lied to prisoners. If I said I was going to find something out, I'd make sure that I went and found it out and went back to them. And that's how you earn respect. And interesting, really, that I've worked with both women and male prisoners, and males are much easier to work with than female prisoners. Trust me.
We'll ask
women are very much more. Sorry.
I was going to say we're going to ask you a bit about that, I think, but before we do, could you just give us a little sort of bit of insight into what life is like for a prisoner in a jail like Wormwood Scrubs? Because I think very often people try to suggest that life for prisoners is too easy. We in the media very often do that, probably with lower category prisons. But can you just tell us what it is like for prisoners inside a prison like the ones that you've been in charge of?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think you have to remember what a prison is. A prison is first and foremost to protect the public. Secondly, it's the punishment, and the punishment is to remove somebody's liberty. That's what the punishment is. The punishment is not inside the jail. The punishment is the removal of their liberty. And then the third thing is to rehabilitate, or try and rehabilitate prisoners, to make them useful members of society upon release. And that's the role of a prison. When you come into prison, many prisoners find it a complete shock that suddenly, where they could choose what time they went to bed, or choose what time they woke up, or shut their door or lock their door, all of that is done for you. It's decided when you eat, what you eat, when you go in your cell for the night, when you wake up in the morning. Where you go in the jail is you're escorted. A door is open for you, it's shut and it's locked behind you. So all of that, can be quite a shock for some people. The most compassionate prison officers I've ever met are those that take prisoners in initially, both in receptions and on first night centres, where a lot of people struggle. That sort of isolation away from their families, and having absolutely no decision-making process at all.
Just to pick up your point about women and finding it more difficult to manage women, why was that?
Well, not necessarily more difficult to manage. It's just women are... they're much more emotional, much more likely to self-harm. And by self-harm, I don't mean, sort of a few scratches on your wrist. I mean really serious self-harms, probably far too serious for this programme. They are, women by their nature are, usually nurturers, carers. They have children, and women will worry much more about what's going on the outside than a man will. So a man will be more about himself and what his needs are, whereas a woman has much more sort of social needs, like needs of the children, who's looking after them, what are they up to, that sort of thing. So it makes them much more emotional. And of course, you've got hormone changes with women. So if you've got a whole landing full of hormonal women, it can be quite tough.
Yeah.
And the slightest thing, because women in general are more emotional, the slightest thing can set women off. I've seen sort of riots start off from over the size of somebody's pudding because they didn't think their piece of pudding was big enough. That petty things like that.
Vanessa, you've written a book called The Governor, and in there you talk about some of your encounters with some of Britain's most notorious prisoners, including Myra Hindley and Rose West. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about your encounters with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes I regret writing that because I think sometimes, the media makes these people out to be something that they're not. And certainly, Myra Hindley, when I met Myra Hindley at Cookham Wood in I think it was the late 80s, she was there. I had taken some prisoners from Holloway to Cookham Wood on transfer. And when we arrived, as is customary, when you arrive at another jail, you're usually offered a cup of tea. And it's just sort of friendship from one jail to another. And so this officer called this sort of trustee Myra, and she came and she sort of asked all of us, what we wanted. And I said, a cup of tea, please. And off she went. And the officer next to me said, you know who that was, don't you? And I said, absolutely no idea. Myra, I think she said her name was. And she said, that's Myra Hindley. Now, when you think of Myra Hindley, you think of the bleached blonde, the piercing eyes, the horrendous crimes that she did. Well, this was a little old lady. She looked like, she wouldn't have been out of place, sort of, pushing a shopping trolley down the high street. She had baggy clothes on, shuffling along. She had mousy brown hair. Her elbows were through her old knitted cardigan. She was nothing extraordinary, nothing special. And if I'd have bumped into her in the street, I wouldn't have known who she was. And I think it kind of sort of says it all, really, when you think of this demon with evil stamped on their foreheads, but actually they're not, and they're nothing special, but people make them special by headlining Myra Hindley. And even today, if you see some report in a newspaper, that's the photo that they use. Yes. But I mean, she was nothing like that.
How about Rose West, Vanessa?
Well, Rose West, I looked after Rose West for about 6 to 8 weeks. She was at Holloway, and she was awaiting trial for the horrendous crimes that she committed. We looked after her. She was down in the segregation unit because obviously when prisoners like that are so high profile come into jail, they have to be kept segregated from the rest of the general population, because not only for their safety, but others' safety, so she was down in the segregation unit, which I was in charge of at that time. Myself and the duty governor there at the time informed her that Fred had unfortunately killed himself at Winson Green Prison. And that was on New Year's Day. And there wasn't a flicker of emotion when she found out, not a flicker. And that kind of said it all to me, that, she's a definite psychopath. Yeah. She showed very little emotion. She don't get me wrong, she did exactly what she was told to do and everything. And absolutely. She looked like your auntie that, came to stay occasionally. There was nothing extraordinary about her, only her offences. Working with people like that, I think it's important. My job was never to judge them. As far as I was concerned, they were already judged, and my job was to keep them safe, and that's what I tried to do.
It's absolutely fascinating, Vanessa. We could talk to you for hours, but I think we've run out of time. But thanks ever so much for coming on the Daily Tea. That's Vanessa Frake-Harris, former prison governor.
Gordon, shall we discuss the royal video that everyone's talking about?
Let's.
Should we have a listen to it first?
Yep.
I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. The last 9 months have been incredibly tough for us as a family. Life as you know it can change in an instant, and we've had to find a way to navigate the stormy waters and road unknown. The cancer journey is complex, scary, and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you. With humility, it also brings you face to face with your own vulnerabilities in a way you've never considered before. And with that, a new perspective on everything.
So that's Prince William's wife, Catherine, announcing the fact that she's finished her chemotherapy and is now focused on staying cancer-free. Kind of sepia-tinted, nostalgic. I liked it. I'm not sure you did.
No, I know you liked it. And if people are just listening to that audio clip, they would probably think, yeah, that's nice. Listening to it myself just as audio, I've got no problem with it. The problem I have is with the images. So anybody who, well, for people who haven't seen it, the clip has lots of footage of William and Kate and the children, some clips of them playing cards with her family as well. Lots of slow-mo, lots of them cuddling, lots of them lying on the ground together,
adorable,
walking through a wheat field in slow-mo, and I didn't like it at all. I felt it was the wrong way of going about it. I think that what she is saying is very impactful, and as I said, I think that's fine. Everything she's said about cancer is right. But why, if she wants to reach out to people who have been through the same thing, why are we not seeing any cancer nurses? Why are we not seeing maybe her meeting some cancer patients? Why are we not seeing some footage of her receiving treatment, which would be really, striking? And
because it's a vision of hope. It's looking forwards, not backwards. She's there as a mum. She's a mum. She's a royal. She's a wife. You're reacting like this because, let's be honest, you are the Princess Anne of the Telegraph. Okay, you are. Keep calm, carry on.
If you say so.
Hardworking. You don't like the emotional. You don't like the Wizard of Oz curtain being ripped from this family.
No, I don't. I think that the one of the biggest strengths for the royal family is their mystique, and I think that if you give away too much of that mystique, it lessens them.
But they've always been depicted as being very safe, very serious. They've never indulged in the kind of public displays of affection we associate with Harry and Meghan, constantly hand-holding and poring over each other. You and I know, because we've covered the royals together for years, that if they did cuddle, like, do you remember when we were in Canada and they cuddled after that dragon boat race on Prince Edward Island, and all the photographers were like, they're touching each other, and took pictures.
Yeah.
Then at the Olympics, you were in the velodrome with them watching Sir Chris
Yeah.
Hoy. They embraced again.
Yeah.
So this is them saying, look, the monarchy has faced an existential crisis because of Megxit, the death of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, because of the King's cancer diagnosis, now hers, maybe even because of the Duke of York debacle. But rest assured, this institution is in safe hands because the couple who wear the crown, in the vein of Victoria and Albert, George VI and the Queen Mother, the Queen and Philip, are rock solid.
Yeah, but the problem I have anyway is, yes, you mentioned those moments when we've seen them being affectionate before, but that was genuine and spontaneous. This looked like it was scripted. It made me feel uncomfortable because I felt as though it was kind of put on. It didn't seem natural. So,
is it a bit too Sussex-ish?
Yeah, so I think that look, they're almost trying to out Sussex the Sussexes, aren't
Right.
they? Which is not a good place for them to be.
I mean, to be fair, this doesn't look out of place in comparison to Oprah Winfrey and Netflix,
Yeah.
does it? And Spare, this is like, oh my goodness, by comparison. Yeah. Beyonce's just texted, this looks quite reserved. Harry and Meghan, though, wonder what they're thinking in Montecito. Wonder what Meghan is saying to Harry. Oh my God, if we had produced this video, we would have been castigated by the British media. It's so unfair how William and Kate are treated so differently to you and me, Harry. Wouldn't she?
She might.
Because we would have castigated them if they had produced this.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm not going to do a Prince Harry impression.
Oh, go on.
No, sorry. But because it would involve probably him swearing at me, which is my...
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Meghan. We'll do our own video in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that they don't want to be trying to outdo the Sussexes. You know, their strength is that they should be above all that. They shouldn't be trying to be this sort of Instagram, perfection. I go back to my original point. I know, but
to appeal to the youngsters.
I know, but I go back to my original point. If it's about cancer, why is she not using that platform to A, thank the people who've treated her by showing them, and B, show people that, look, I've been through what you may be going through. Here's me, whether it's just her taking a tablet or, whatever, just something that shows you that she has been through this, rather than here's me walking through a wheat field looking like the perfect family.
We'll get on to reader responses in just a moment. One Gen Zer, my 15-year-old daughter, had a bit of a surprising response because I thought she'd like the whole Insta nature of it all. Just going to read our little message. that video was quite cheesy and a bit awkward. Like, yes, it was very sweet, but also just really weird, like filming her leaning on a tree and looking into the distance. I don't know. It's just like this. You're in real life, not a film.
Yeah,
I'm
awkward.
saying that verbatim. She's going to hate me for it
Yeah.
if she listens to this.
It was awkward. She's right. And I asked quite a few of our colleagues earlier, all of whom are younger than me, obviously, what they thought of it, thinking they might all say, oh, it was great, wasn't it? Touchy-feely. And more of them didn't like it than did.
Look at the division in the Telegraph readership, as is ever the case.
Yeah.
Mrs. Wake, a beautiful video showing the value of having a loving family to support you through the hardest of times. This is the princess's story presented the way she wanted it to be, full of hope, joy and gratitude, with an underlying message that she is not through the woods yet.
Meanwhile, somebody who's written in anonymously says, I understand why they're doing this, but I consider it highly regrettable, as I expect they do. The viewing tastes and demands of the public have become excessive and immodest. We should not need to see anyone else cuddling and kissing, and if they feel they need to show us, then they do so on the understanding that we are voyeurs. We should not be.
Brackets. G. Rayner.
Okay, all right. Maybe.
You can check out the video and indeed all the coverage of it, including a piece that I have written called The Cambridge's Canoodling, in reference to their previous titles, on the Telegraph website.
Yeah, because we couldn't find anything beginning with a W that related to Wales.
We did say yesterday, what's alliterative with Wales is? You said something. You said...
what was it now? The whoopee making Wales. It's maybe not appropriate.
It's not a good headline. While we're talking about the privately educated, I just want to do a little shout out, Gordon. Did you go to private school or good old fashioned grammar?
I did go to a private school.
Did you? So did I. Well, we are the enemy as far as Labour's concerned. VAT on private school things is quite a thing. And we know that lots of you are worried about it, thinking about it, talking about it, and therefore would like to hear your story. So if you're being affected by that policy, we're going to do a Daily Tea special on the issue. Please do get in touch. It's email thedailytea@telegraph.co.uk, or of course you can get in touch via our socials, because we are down with those kids at Daily Tea Podcast. We're going to be doing that special on Friday.